Do you remember this? Occupy Wall Street. I mean, doesn't it seem like a million? We were so naive back then. Felt like our country was experiencing absolute chaos back then, but looking back at it now, it kind of feels like the good old days in some way. Why did they go away? What happened? Did they just disappear? Or is there the possibility that maybe the banks and the big financial firms made a deal? Leave us alone and we'll start funneling money your way. See, there are many things that happened that, were happening that we felt kind of good about until, we started to experience what we're experiencing now, an invasion of U.S. cities. Tourist destinations are cesspools of dangerous crime, and most of us still have faith in our election process, but it's hanging by a thread. It almost feels like the chaos surrounding us today is too much, too overwhelming to rationalize. How did our country turn upside down so seemingly fast? What's happening today isn't chaos, because the definition of chaos is complete disorder and confusion. I'm not sure that's what we're experiencing. I think this is very well thought out. The people behind everything happening in our country today aren't confused at all. Some very smart, I believe, very evil people have been behind almost all of this. In fact, the current destruction of America that we are experiencing today is by design. And tonight I will walk you through their playbook to bring Lady Liberty down to her knees. Well, hello, America. Tonight, I want to welcome you that are watching, either be it on BlazeTV or YouTube or social media. Thank you for tuning in. You are now part of the resistance. Oh, and I'm writing all the names down, and I'll turn you in so fast. It wasn't me, it was Anyway, you are taking a stand. You're taking a stand just by trying to learn what's really going on. And once you see, you can't unsee. These are insanely dangerous times. I talked to Tucker Carlson about that yesterday. The conversations I am having on a daily basis with media people who have seen almost everything, the conversations I'm having are in the insane zone. We are approaching something. Something is happening to our country right now. You know it, and I know it. Even the people who don't pay attention, probably not those who are still paying $5,000 to see Taylor Swift may not know it, but everybody has a sense something's not right. Well, it's deliberate. We are being pushed to collapse. If you've been watching this show since, when did we go on the air? 2004, I think, on CNN, and then 2008 on Fox. We are seeing what we talked about back in those days in nearly every aspect of American society. The economy, immigration, the welfare state, big tech, information, the media, it's everywhere. I told you at the time that about 2008, I talked to experts in revolution. How do you have a revolution in a country like America? Well, there are certain pillars that have to be taken out, and I'll show them to you again tonight. Much of this began in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. Obama started. Actually, George Bush kind of started it by violating the free market to save the free market. That doesn't work. Then Obama took it up the next level. Trump then delayed it, slowed it down, actually put us in reverse, as I'll show you later on in the show. But Obama's goons now are finishing it, the fundamental transformation of America. The ideology that they're using right now is the same ideology in 2008. I feel as if it's 2011 and I'm just starting the Blaze, and if you were watching me back then, you're probably going to remember some of the names I'm going to bring up and mention tonight. I can't stress this enough. You are the resistance to what's going on. You just standing up and saying no is what they're afraid of. You would not be paying attention to boobs like me and others that they're trying to make sure that you don't see by suppressing us. And then looking at our network of people, the people who watch us, and try to suppress them. They are terrified of you. If you haven't become a subscriber to the Blaze TV, please, now is the time. As I'll show you later in the show, what's happening right now, we have them on the run. However, they're retreating in some areas, but they ain't done. They're not even close. We must continue to pursue. What's happening now in America is very similar to what happened with the communists when the Soviets actually purged their rivals and flipped Eastern European countries to communism. Any and all threat to their power was immediately eliminated. The past couple of years, for an American, I've never seen any of this stuff happen before. It's alarming to say the least. The feds are raiding the homes now of the regime's political rivals. More agents of the regime just fined the regime's main political rival $350 million in something that will destroy New York and business in New York. It is something that even MSNBC reported this week. They did their research. This has never been done before in America. Now, is this going to be appealed? Yeah, most definitely. Will Trump win? I don't know. I have no idea. But that's not the point to the regime. The process is the point. We are watching a slow purge of anyone that can use policy to stop. See, that's the thing. They're not just doing it to Donald Trump. They're also teaching Elon Musk. Is it a coincidence that as soon as he took over X and started standing for free speech, 7 federal investigations? They're just going to bleed you dry of money and time and sanity until you finally say, I don't care anymore. Just whatever. Just leave me alone. That's what they want. But Donald Trump is not built that way, and neither is Elon Musk. They need to silence anyone, you, me, that might speak out. This is going to continue, and we really are all part of the resistance. You're either all in or you're of no use. You're all in on the other side. There is be no spectators on the field. And if you think you can just spectate and sit it out, you're on the wrong side. They'll probably throw President Trump in prison. If they can't do that, I mean, at this point, with everything we're learning, I fear for the life of any candidate that steps in against this. They will do anything to stop him. They could throw him in jail. He'll still run. What do they do next? Does he hang himself with a paper curtain this time? They can take Joe Rogan down. They could kick me off of every platform. But I know who I am. I mean, I had a dream years ago that I was going to be teaching things under a tree with a very small group of people. So I'm not stopping, and I'm not a good walker. I mean, look at me. I don't want to do all that walking, but I will. BlazeTV was built for this time, but still, we're on the cloud. If you really want to shut us down, but we have to be in touch with one another. Please, we're all in this together. Let's join together. None of us can stop. There is too much at stake. So, what are we up against? Well, a few weeks ago, Joe Biden had probably the worst 48 hours of his entire presidency, and that's saying an awful lot. Just to recap, Biden's own Justice Department declared that they won't be pursuing charges against the president because he was too mentally incompetent to stand trial. What? If he can't be tried, then I don't think he should be near the button at all. Hey, what's this? Does this mean I get ice cream? No, let's keep him out of the office. Too brain dead to answer questions, probably too brain dead to run the country. But is he running the country? Well, panic ensued at the White House, and Joe Biden himself called an emergency press conference to address the nation. Somehow, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around this one, Biden took a victory lap, praising the special counsel for absolving him, but then he turned around and criticized the special counsel for how he was absolved. If that sounds ridiculous, welcome to America 2024. It's incoherent. It doesn't make any sense. Listen to Biden answering a question from Peter Doocy on the state of his mental capacity.
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine.
My memory is so bad, I let you speak. This is a press conference that was an equivalent of a dumpster fire and a giant train jumping the tracks and crashing into the dumpster fire. Consider this. Probably over half the country thought this emergency press conference was Joe Biden getting ready to announce that he would be stepping down. That's how bad things have gotten. We all know the truth here, and this is not being mean. I actually think his family is abusive. I mean, if I ever was like this, I want my family to step in and go, Dad, you got to stop. You got to stop. Joe Biden is not in charge. He is president in name only. But there has always been somebody putting all of this together. Who? Who is putting it all together? Well, I think we know some of the organizations and some of the people involved. But I mean, if you had to put one person in that, who would it be?
Somebody asked once, would you have liked to have served a third term if you could have? And I say, I wouldn't have wanted to be out front. But if somebody had said, you can sit in your basement in your sweats and there's somebody else who's playing the president with a microphone in his or her ear and you can just kind of give suggestions in policy, then I might have enjoyed doing that.
Oh, that's great. Puppet master. Oh, wait a minute. That's an old anti-Jewish trope, right? And he's Muslim. Whoops. Look, here's the thing. This has always been Obama's third term one way or another. Before the mainstream media or Media Matters laughs at me for all of this, what were they saying after the 2020 election? Well, let's look. From USA Today, Biden insists his presidency is not a third Obama term. His staff picks suggest otherwise. It's not Glenn Beck, it's USA Today. Here, the fine people at National Public Radio. What most Biden picks have in common? Time in the Obama administration. Okay, from the Associated Press. Obama reunion, Biden fills cabinet with former White House leaders. This has always been about the Obama people gaming the system and, in effect, having a third term in office. This isn't a secret. They were even saying it. Obama still had to make do on his plan to fundamentally transform the United States of America. We told you that this was going to get much worse. After his term, it will get much worse. In fact, I fiction wrote that if I were writing a fiction, I would have somebody else who you could throw under the bus after the first term, but I would have all my people in, making him do the things that I wanted to do, but I couldn't do because I didn't want to be unpopular. Have him do it all, take the whole train and jam it into the side of a mountain, and then you could come back and go, we got to come together. The same leader, the same people, the same activists, utilizing the same strategy. That is currently happening behind the scenes from the shadows. And what exactly is the Obama strategy? Well, it hasn't changed much. You know, there are certain things, 5 pillars really of society, that hold everything up. I mean, they are the supports that hold everything up. They unite us, they stabilize a country, and it's the same in every country. 5 pillars. First one is government. They provide for the common defense. They provide for the welfare, making of laws, protecting our borders, defend and protect the Constitution. How many of those things do you trust the military? I'd say this is the strongest one. Welfare, as we'll show you, is absolutely out of control. Making laws, they don't make laws. They make policy, but not constitutionally. They do it through the office of the president. That's not Constitution. So, might as well write that one off. And border? I don't think so. Okay. So that pillar is damaged, to say the least. The next one is culture. What is our culture? Our culture is sick. Our culture is becoming a culture of death, pornography, the worst of the worst. Culture would include entertainment, art, but also family and schools to some degree. What is it our schools are doing? Are they reinforcing the family, or are they destroying the family? Disney. Good God, I've never seen anybody go more wrong than Disney. So that pillar is greatly damaged. Law and order. Third pillar of society. Law and order. That's the police. We reimagined them. The judges. Really? The DAs, George Soros. The Attorney Generals, George Soros. The Justice Department. And civil rights. Does Donald Trump have the same civil rights as Hunter Biden? Next pillar, money, the economy. That's the banks, the Fed trying to keep inflation down, gold, the businesses and jobs and debt. Do you trust the Fed on any of these things? Do you trust the government on any of these things? Do you trust the big, huge banks that they're not ripping you off? And I don't mean stealing pennies from you. I mean by making risky bets, losing it all, and then we pay for it. Do you trust that? Because I think law and order and money and the economy, you think we're in recovery? Do you believe that? The last one is media and information and education and science. This is all about communication. Don't trust the media. Information is now disinformation. Education is disinformation, and so is science. You topple one of these pillars and the roof starts to come down. You can force a country as powerful as the United States to crumble and fall. Look at all of them. I didn't think they would get defense and the police. I really didn't. I didn't think they'd get business. All of them are overwhelmed. They are all on the verge of collapse. The process of fundamental transformation. I've referred to this as top down, bottom up, inside out. What does that mean? Obama began this in the wake of 2008, the crash, and his goons continue it today. I'm going to show you later in the show, this strategy is how a capitalist country turned a communist country in 3 weeks. The American version of this strategy is a little bit different. The rules have been altered a bit, but the main driver was written down by Saul Alinsky in his book, Rules for Radicals. I haven't looked at that one for a while. What is it? Their main strategy that's being executed on us now is make the enemy live up to their own book of rules. What does that mean? Well, for the 1960s era's radicals that Obama and his team idolized, the people currently pulling the strings of Joe Biden, this was the moment they felt was the linchpin for fundamental transformation.
And this administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America.
How's that war going? It's a war we never check on. We never see a total of how many lives have been lost in this war. In the book of rules that Solzhenitsyn was writing, it became LBJ's welfare state. And the radicals of the 1960s saw an opening, topping multiple pillars of society. It was now possible. I'll show you exactly what they tried. Then I'll show you how they never let up. These radicals went into overdrive during the Obama administration. The very same people are at work today during the Biden administration. This time, they're not just focused on the welfare state. They're coming for every single pillar of society. They want it all to come down. And what is the final phase? We're in it now. I'll share it. Back in a minute. Sometimes the solutions we seek to fix a problem are really, really easy. Then there's the problems when you live with pain. If you've lived in pain, you know exactly what I mean. For years, I lived with terrible pain in my hands, and I went to everybody. And everybody had a different answer, but none of them changed my life. I will tell you that something that worked for me that I honestly never thought would work was Relief Factor. My wife told me, take it. And I'm like, honey, I've been to the best doctors. How is this going to work? She's like, take it. So I took it. I took it for 3 weeks. Still taking it today. It fights your pain through fighting inflammation. 100% drug-free, developed by doctors to help reduce or eliminate pain. And over 1 million people have tried Relief Factor's Quick Start Kit. 70% of them have gone to order it again and again. See how a Relief Factor can help you. 3-week Quick Start Kit, $19.95, comes with Relief Factor's Feel Better or Your Money Back guarantee. So give it a try. Visit relieffactor.com, 800-4-RELIEF. 800, the number 4, relief. Top down, bottom up, and inside out. What does that even mean? This is the playbook of fundamental transformation. Top down, this is your government, and it's infiltrated by legal insurgents. They're voted into power. They're brought in by the administration. This is when the radicals become policymakers. So if this is your government, they're scattered all over, and they start coming down. Okay. But it's not effective, at least enough, unless you have the second part. And that is the bottom up. These are the radicals that are pushing up. And who's squeezed in the middle? Well, you are. Makes a nice sandwich. Those aren't sesame seeds. Those are radicals that you intentionally put in there. You just didn't know. Radical policy always butts up against the Constitution. But when you have policies that are bearing down high taxes, immigration, any of the things that are going on, high crime, it's all done by the radicals that are not the bun. They look all the same and they don't answer to anybody. Who's doing this? Okay? That's pushing down on you. And then the activist at the right side, right time, they rise up and it becomes chaotic, turns the inside out, and everyone says the same exact thing. Somebody make it stop. We can't live like this anymore. That's when fundamental transformation is complete. You can look at this in many different revolutions. The one I have always looked at, because it's exactly this, is how the Soviets turned Czechoslovakia from a capitalist to communist country in 3 years in 1948. Remember, there was a treaty. The Soviet Union had to be invited in. It's kind of like Beetlejuice, I think. You have to invite them in. They can turn a country communist, but the USSR was not allowed to cross a border unless everything was upside down and the regime called them in. This is how they did it. They put a bunch of communists all in the top of the government, caused all kinds of chaos on the street. Then their useful idiots stood up and the people said, make it stop. The tanks were on the border, ready. And when the people said, make it stop, the communists at the top, the seeds on the bun, they were all like, we need help, Russia. And the USSR rolled across the border. A member of the Czechoslovakian Communist Party revealed the entire process in a memo called "And Not a Shot Fired." It describes the 3 key purposes for bottom-up's role, along with the new radicalized government. As I read these off, I want you to think about how the left has treated organizations like Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, and Antifa. Bottom up, I'm quoting. Systematically, bottom up, systematically supports the revolutionaries in the organs of power, enhances their strength, and makes up for numerical weakness. They realize, they know they're in the minority. That's why they're so afraid of you. They're in the minority, they know it. But for fundamental change to happen, they have to make it appear. What are those puffer fishes, right? Don't ever have them. They're very dangerous unless prepared by a very good chef in Japan, I hear. Anyway, what do? They make, this is not attractive. They make themselves appear like I look like right now. Bigger. They have to do that. They have to convince the entire country that they have the will of the people, that they are the ones that are right and you are wrong. That's when constitutions are changed. Next, it has a direct effect on limiting the influence and positions of waverers and enemies standing in the path of future progress of the revolution. How many times have you heard them saying this? They're standing in the way of progress. So what does this actually mean? Intimidation. That's what it means. How many conservatives now feel scared to exercise their First Amendment rights? I just don't want to cause any more problems. I just want my kids to be okay in school. How many choose not to speak out over fear of retaliation from the Biden administration or the lackeys that are just blindly following in the streets? Then, third one, it awakens the forces of the people. It breaks through the onerous circle of intimidation and spiritual terror of the old institutions, the church, etc. Culture. Remember I showed you culture? That's a family. That's church. Church is still the biggest threat. They attack churches, always. Soviet Union, always. Why? Because if you're like me, or what I try to be, I serve God. I do this because I feel I have responsibility. And I know who I serve, and it ain't the government, and it isn't my pocketbook. I know who I serve. And when you have a population like that, they're absolutely unafraid. That's why they must break the backs of the churches, and they've done that through infiltration. They attack churches, they attack religion, God, Bibles, guns, right? They use the unions, the mass media, universities, political parties, businesses, whatever it takes. Is any of this sounding familiar to you? Now, this was happening in the 1940s. But back around 10 years ago, I talked about what we were seeing in the Obama administration. It looked a whole lot like the 1960s version of the same thing. I just didn't make the connection at the time. In the late 1960s, there was an article published in The Nation by 2 socialists. who were the socialist names you've heard before. Richard Andrew Cloward and his wife, Frances Fox Piven. Capitalizing on LBJ's new welfare state, Cloward and Piven launched a new strategy. They used Saul Alinsky's rule of make the enemy live up to their own book of rules. I didn't really understand this like I do today. The welfare state, book of rules. Cloward and Piven decided to launch a campaign to overwhelm and collapse the system through government welfare programs. It involved, quote, a massive drive to recruit the poor onto the welfare rolls. Now, under this strategy, welfare was a Trojan horse to make the entire system crumble down. As more and more people got onto welfare, the state economy would buckle under strain. The welfare state was now being ordered from the top down. But Cloward and Piven proposed a bottom-up movement led by, quote, demonstrations and cadres of aggressive organizers. We got those in spades. When I started talking about Cloward and Piven years ago, it was in the aftermath of the 2008 crash, the massive bailouts, and then the rise of street movements like Occupy Wall Street. Then there was Black Lives Matter, who I believe most think rose after Trump. But no, it was not long after President Obama. When I began talking about this, I was mocked by the mainstream media. They said that I helped trigger death threats on Frances Fox Piven, and she's just a little old lady. Guys, I didn't write the article back in the 1960s. She and her husband did. All I did was restate what they wrote. The Cloward and Piven strategy was so effective that once it was put into motion, it forced New York City into bankruptcy. Test case. Welfare spending pushed New York City to $487 million deficit by 1974. They were forced to borrow $2.2 billion just to keep the lights on. Their outstanding debt was $13.5 billion in the 1970s. It was in the 1990s that Mayor Giuliani addressed what happened. In 1988, he said in a speech, quote, this wasn't an accident. It wasn't an atmospheric thing. It wasn't supernatural. This is the result of policies and programs designed to have maximum number of people get on welfare. That's not me. I didn't hatch this strategy. That was Cloward and Piven. And collapse is the ultimate goal. The mass media freaked out about me talking about this in 2011. Must be I'm over the target, I thought at the time. Well, lo and behold, Piven's name has just resurfaced after the 2020 election. The New York Times, who called her just a grandmother who's not doing anything anymore, the New York Times said she has become the intellectual guru of activist progressives. What's she been preaching and teaching? Has any of it changed our strategy? Again from the New York Times, quote, trying to work within the system is terribly misplaced, Ms. Piven argues, since it's rigged by elites against the poor. What is needed is a sense of crisis that will force change. Wow. Old dog, or in this case, ancient dog, same old tricks. Kind of interesting how Piven has resurfaced, getting all new media attention just before what some would say is Obama's third term. I mean, the Biden administration, obviously. Overwhelm, collapse, transform. That is the Cloward-Piven strategy, and it's now spread throughout every pillar of American society. And you'll never guess what they targeted after welfare. You'll never guess. Voting. Now, I'm sure this might hit a little close to home, given what happened in 2020, but we're going there next. You and your family have a future to protect, because we all make it past this. We do. We make it past it. What shape? I don't know. But you have a future. We do live on, and you have to be prepared for that situation when it comes and if it comes. Emergency food storage. They mocked. They're mocking everything that is true. That should tell you something. The Department of Homeland Security says you should have survival kits, and you should have ways to filter water, and you should have food and medicine. But then when you collect it, they call you crazy. My Patriot Supply has helped millions of American families prepare for whatever might come their way. Are you prepared yet? You can start with a 4-week emergency food kit. There are 16 food and drink varieties, and the meals contain 2,000 calories per day. So they're going to get you through any emergency situation for 4 weeks. They're all sealed inside, incredibly durable packaging. They last up to 25 years in storage, and maybe most importantly, the food is really good. Stock up on all of the food kits that your family might need. Just start with 4 weeks. MyPatriotSupply.com. Get each 4-week food kit for $60 off. You'll also get free shipping. Protect yourself, protect your people, your family. Start preparing now at MyPatriotSupply.com. That's MyPatriotSupply.com. I want to take you back to the chalkboard, those pillars of society that I showed you earlier. Just try to think, is any of those solid? Are they being pushed to the full-on collapse? The Cloward-Piven strategy may have just begun with welfare, but it is everywhere now. After welfare, Cloward-Piven shifted their focus to the American vote. I want to show you this. This is Bill Clinton signing in the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. I remember people talking about it. I didn't know much about it at all. I did not know that Cloward-Piven, through Acorn, remember them, were the ones who got that to be signed. Now, check and see if we're feeling any of the ramifications of this law today. What did it do? 1, it eliminated many of the controls on voter fraud. Then, it made it easier for voters to register, but difficult to determine validity. Examiners were under orders not to ask anyone for identification or proof to citizenship. That's crazy. States are now required to permit the mailing of voter registrations, enabling anyone to register without having personal contact with registration official. And restrictions were placed on states' ability to prune people who had died, relocated, or been convicted of crimes that made them ineligible to vote. Now, doesn't that seem like it would lead to, 2020? Do you trust the electoral system anymore? I think I got one more in me. And then I don't know. Society, it's almost like somebody's just pushing. So we would declare a full-on collapse of the way we choose our elected officials. We got to come up with something new. And someone will suggest a complete great reset, just like they did with welfare. And that's the entire point. Now, you know the origins, and it didn't begin when Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton. The process had been in the works for decades. And Cloward-Piven may not have meant for their strategy to domino across every spectrum of American society, but it's hard not to notice its effect everywhere you look. Look at this. National debt now on pace to top $54 trillion in the next 10 years. Everyone, including the Congressional Budget Office, agrees it's not sustainable. But is anyone cutting the budget? Anyone cutting the spending? Americans can no longer afford groceries, but the government just says, you know what? It's the fault of those dang grocery stores. We're just going to keep on spending, and we'll get after those grocery stores. Record numbers of Americans can no longer pay their rent, but will government alter its fiscal policies? No, they're doubling down. It makes no sense until you remember Cloward-Piven. Push it to the brink of collapse. Now, speaking of collapsing the economy through welfare, Biden just introduced new guidelines. That's what we used to call passing laws, but they don't do that anymore. He just came up with some new guidelines for Medicaid. It now includes cover for rent, utilities, and food. Medicaid. That's full-on communism. I just showed you that record amounts of Americans can no longer pay for groceries and rent. Don't worry about it. The government will take care of all of that. How is that sustainable? Tell me we're not intentionally being pushed towards collapse. And it keeps getting worse. Keep looking through this lens. Re-examine what's currently happening at the border. 2023 was the worst year for illegal immigration ever. But despite that fact, ICE recently circulated a plan to continue releasing thousands into the country. They're not even going to stop them anymore. Just release them. I don't think anybody actually knows how many illegals are currently in this country, but this graph, it says nearly 17 million and growing around 1 million more every year. That makes it bigger than 38 of the 50 states. This graph estimates the illegals are costing us over $150 billion. That number jumped 40 billion just since Obama took office. And speaking of collapsing the system through welfare, 59% of non-citizen households, which includes illegals, are now drawing government welfare. How? Well, 22% of them are just taking cash. 42% are using welfare food programs. 42% are using Medicaid, and remember, Medicaid now includes rent payments. We just had the worst year for illegal crossings ever. How much worse is it going to get? How's your school going to be able to pay? They have to pay more money to teach more people that are here. Hotels, one hotel is paying $7 million. They're being paid from somebody who? $7 million a month to house some of these people. At what point do we just crumble? Well, if you know Cloward-Piven Strategy, isn't that the entire point? Back in a minute. Quickly, I want to just stick with welfare for a second. In 2022, the government spent $1.19 trillion on 80 different welfare programs. Biden's latest budget proposal bumps that to $2.6 trillion. 11.1 million will be added to Medicaid. It's not going to be really. 6.6 million added to Obamacare. What exactly was the point of Obamacare? Wasn't it to lower the cost of health care, or was it something else? Employer-provided health care costs have skyrocketed, more than they have in the last 10 years. And Obamacare premiums continue their Mount Everest-like ascent. Oh, but don't worry, CNN points out the government's going to pay to offset all those costs. Where are these money trees in D.C.? Looking through the Cloward-Piven lens, the point of Obamacare is pretty clear. Millions more are added every year. Prices continue to rise. The government pays to offset those costs. It's a house of cards spiraling towards an unsustainable collapse. Look at the law and order pillar, because on the surface, it makes absolutely no sense what the left is doing to our criminal justice system, does it? They're refusing to arrest criminals, refusing to prosecute. They let criminals go. The result is complete chaos, an implosion of law and order in some of U.S. cities that used to be considered some of the safest in the country, if not the world. But it's not just large cities where it's happening. This is a report from America Analyzed mid-level cities all across the country. They found crime is rising all over Main Street, USA. In Atlanta, homicide investigations have risen by 60%. Burglaries up 31%, vehicle thefts up 22%. Numbers are same in Pittsburgh, Tucson, and Milwaukee. The data is clear. Why are these radical district attorneys and AGs doubling down on their radical criminal justice reform? Why are they pushing law and order to collapse? Unless that's the entire point. Everything is being pushed to the brink of collapse with the explosion now of technology, and there is an unlimited supply, even a bombardment of information available. It's gotten to the point where you're on overload. And the old ways of becoming informed right now collapsing. And the crazy part of all of this is that the mainstream media did it to themselves. Last year, a Gallup poll showed that over half of the country, 53%, said they no longer trust the media. The majority of Americans are not turning on cable news or clicking onto the Washington Post or New York Times. They're going elsewhere. This has led to a train wreck within the media establishment. Last year, media companies cut more than 20,000 jobs, and layoffs continue. Now again, the media turned the American public against themselves. They are responsible for this. But when the collapse happens, the regime has to take steps. The independent media is on very shaky ground right now. Do you think we'll be bailed out, or the mainstream media? News broke a couple of weeks ago that the Biden administration is planning to use artificial intelligence to censor what Americans see, hear, and read. The media so blatantly became a propaganda arm for a left-wing government, it has led to a full-on collapse. Now the question is, what happens next? Blaze, Daily Wire, are we even going to be allowed to exist? I made this chalkboard a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, the final phase. And I said, this is how you know we're in the final phase. These things will happen. Polarization will lead to civil unrest. The critical stage is riots in the street, but riots all over, most likely based on an election. Economic destabilization. Critical stage, banks, stock market, plunge, deflation. But I think more likely is interest payments larger than the DOD, which we hit today, financial collapse of cities and states due to immigration, BRICS reserve currency because we violated international standards when we went to Russia and took them off the international standards. Tech disruption, critical stage, AI, jobs, misinformation, privacy, finance, communications. Then I said, at some point, I don't know what order these come in, but a trust implosion. People will no longer trust the government or media, the justice system or high tech, the education systems or finance or corporations, or the military and police. And the last stage is we no longer trust each other. When that happens, it all collapses. And you have somebody step in and say, I'll fix it. I don't know how we wake our neighbors up, but this one is critical. We've got to still believe in each other and find ways back to each other, because I don't think Democrat or Republican, unless you're a crazy man, is for any of this. Just the regime is. We'll talk about this more on tomorrow's radio. We'll see you then. From Dallas, good night, America.